Hi everyone, it's Hans here, the founder of Cappuccino, and welcome to this latest episode of Flat Whites and Insights, a podcast created to allow a space for open, honest and vulnerable conversations with real people, all over a beautiful cup of coffee. We're here in my home, so I'll be providing the flat whites, and my guests, they'll be providing the insights. So grab a coffee for yourselves, take a moment, and I hope you enjoy this latest conversation. Thank you, take care, and enjoy. Lucy, hi.
Hiya.
Thanks so much for wanting to come on and have a chat with me here, Flat
Yeah.
Whites and Insights. So it's a while since we had a conversation, really.
Yeah.
A lot's happened. We were just kind of
Lots
talking off
happened.
camera. Life is moving very fast. But
Yeah.
so yeah, we used to, for those who don't know, we used to work together.
Yeah.
And we kind of also connected, or how I see it, like our connection was a lot through the EDI network at that old workplace.
Yeah.
And it's kind of passions we have about connecting and people. But for those who don't know you, can you give like a brief introduction?
Sure.
Who you are, kind of what you're doing for work currently, because I think that is something that is probably going
Yeah.
to come up in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lucy, and I work as a project manager at Cruise Bereavement Support. So I'm currently running a research project with 5 researchers across the UK, looking at how communities can be better equipped to have conversations about grief and bereavement. And I kind of found myself in this industry, in the death industry, due to the fact that I lost my dad in nearly 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years, or we'll have just had the anniversary if it's June next month that we're releasing this.
Yeah.
7th of June will be 3 years since he died.
Even
So
you
it's-
saying that now,
I know.
because obviously we
Yeah.
were colleagues at the time that you were kind of going
Absolutely.
through that. And
Yeah, so,
Wow, 3
and it's
years.
funny, seeing you today and saying, actually, oh my goodness, it's been 2 years since you moved into this house,
Yeah.
and like, must be 2 years since we worked together as well. And yeah, it's really wild. The last 3 years just have just kind of evaporated in lots of ways, and I think there's been lots of ups and downs throughout that I've had to navigate, which is which is why I'm very passionate about coming on things like this and talking about mental health and the impact of life, being 28 and like trying
exactly.
to navigate the world.
Yeah, no, it's and no, thank you for that. And I think, as you say, so when kind of you reached out, we're kind of keen to come on, and I think I was keen to get you on as well, because I have to admit, grief is something that, as much as I'm very comfortable talking about mental health or things I've got experience of, grief is maybe something that everyone is going to experience,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Whereas I know anxiety, depression, things like that, maybe not everyone goes through.
Yeah.
But I think considering it's something that everyone goes through, it's like you say about the conversation really isn't. It still feels like there's people can not. People
Like
maybe
not
feel
know,
isolated
yeah,
or feel alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's just so much stigma in society. I mean, in the UK, we're terrible for not talking about death, dying, bereavement. We hide it away, even in hospitals, the morgue is in the basement somewhere hidden away, like, in a place where actually people die every day.
Yeah, but it's almost like that not here.
It doesn't happen here. We don't talk about that here. So
Yeah.
it's just something that we're kind of ingrained with, not being able to talk about death and dying. And actually, I'd say it probably was the same before Dad died. I think, the last 3 years have been a real journey for me, and like there's been so much personal development and growth that has come through the unfortunate situation that we've been through. But I don't think I would have ever gotten to that point with talking about death and dying previously without that experience. But I am really passionate, like you are, talking about mental health, just trying to bring that visibility. And a lot of people go through grief and they have feelings of grief, which are quite similar to some feelings of depression.
Yeah.
But a lot of people also then develop mental health complications afterwards. And I mean, I have never really suffered with anxiety prior to Dad dying, and then as soon as he died, I was like riddled with it, you know. And I think the fact that he died during the pandemic had a massive part to play in that as well. You know, I had lots of social anxiety that came up through that as well, but also lots of death anxiety. And what that is essentially being afraid that everybody else is going to die, and you know, suddenly panicking if I miss a call from my mum that at a weird time of the day, and I'm thinking, oh my god, what's happened? Or you know, my brother will never call me because he hates speaking on the phone. If he calls me, I panic. I'm like, oh my god, someone's died. You know, something bad has happened. And that's something that really commonly happens as well as just the anxiety, like that social anxiety that comes from, I'm a different person. I've just experienced the death of somebody that I love.
Yeah.
And I'm a different person now, and I don't know how to be like this new version of myself
Almost,
with the people
it's such a big part of you. I guess particularly, I mean, grief, it could be friends, family.
Yeah, it could be anything.
Anyone, colleagues even, I guess it can change, like that whole dynamic in an area, but for yourself, and with it obviously being your father, I can see where, as you say, that is such a big part of your whole life growing up. That is your identity. And,
absolutely.
And so it's interesting, something I want to pick up on there, and thank you for sharing that. And is you mentioned about the kind of signs of maybe grief, and you say that they can be similar to kind of anxiety and depression. And I know something that, I mean, throughout school, probably I often would have like, you know, an upset stomach or something. And I just thought, at the time I didn't know I had anxiety at the time, and had those physical symptoms. And then it's actually once I was diagnosed, and then I kind of found out so much about, you know, anxiety and depression, the physical symptoms, where you get like, you know, you can have headaches, you can have upset stomach, sweating, this, that and the other.
Absolutely.
And it all kind of made sense. But in terms of those kind of symptoms of grief, are they, as you said,
very similar?
So like it's
absolutely.
just feeling physically unwell because of...
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, immediately after Dad died, he was sick for 4 years, as you know. It was why I worked at Cancer Research UK. And I was looking after him and supporting him through the time that he was diagnosed and through his treatment. So part of me thought that I was going to be prepared for him to die, but actually there's nothing that could prepare me for like the finality of it, that real like final moment of that's my dad and I'm never going to see him again. And that's still something that I have to battle with now, and every time something good happens, you still feel that like, that's
almost
you know,
almost
the
like
whole,
I wish I could share with
like
him, or share,
the rest of my life feels like a really long time to go through not having him here. And that's kind of difficult to explain, but the physical sides of like him dying, I mean, I instantly had like insomnia, I couldn't sleep at night, you know, I had PTSD because the end of his life was actually really traumatic because we had to care for him at home because of the pandemic. And because of the timings, it was in June, so it was like right in the middle of the first lockdown where everything was still so chaotic, vaccines weren't around yet, you know, nurses were not able to come into our houses.
Everything was new, everything was uncertain.
Yeah, it was so uncertain. So we had a hospice nurse who came out, saw him on the Monday, said that he was dying. And then on the Tuesday, he like deteriorated, and then they said like we haven't got the facilities to basically give you carers, so me and my siblings and my mum cared for him, and obviously none of us are qualified to do that, so it was traumatic for us. And so the PTSD side of things, which I had no idea that I would, you know, have that impact. I had lots of nightmares about it. I got really bad IBS. I'm also celiac, so I've been used to IBS for a long time, but like, you know, the concept of actually I haven't eaten anything bad for me and I'm still really suffering. The intense fatigue like you get with depression, it's unbelievable how physically exhausted you can feel, you know, that achy everything, you know, your limbs literally feel like lead weight, you know.
And I think it's not just feeling tired, is it?
No.
It's again, it's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it, or I think for me, and some of the like the IBS thing as well, for me, when I said about the upset stomach and stuff, and I always think it was often around exam times or things like that, and that so makes sense now, because I was nervous about the exams.
Absolutely.
Particularly as for me, and maybe something to touch on to about coping mechanisms, or for me growing up, or having control when there's a lot of uncertainty, mine was kind of, you know, my identity as, you know, the smart guy, the academic guy. So probably I was going into those exams thinking like, I need this, not just for me, because everyone thinks that I'm the clever. I built this rod for my own back, so I was like, you know, everyone's like telling me like, parents, oh, Hans, you'll be fine, like, you're gonna smash it, and so like there was more to lose in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it wasn't just the grade; it was my identity.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose actually, it's funny because my partner's an academic, and he has always he's also like was really, really sporty growing up. And we spoke a lot actually at the beginning of our relationship about the identity crisis that he had when he had an injury when he was 18. And
so
it just completely changed, you know, what he could do physically.
Yeah.
And he then kind of, his sister's very, very bright, and she's always been the bright one, he's always been the sporty one.
Yeah.
And losing that ability to do sports in the way that he had, he was like, right, I'm going to be the bright one as well now, you know, and he really threw himself into that.
Into it, yeah. It's so common with sport, though. It's, I mean, working in, obviously, a day job now in football.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
I don't think there's enough being done, particularly at grassroots level where we work in that kind of player welfare. Again, that's something we're in the kind of putting our strategy together, and it's something I'm very passionate about, as you kind of know, and it's an area I want to look at, or knowing people through football, or people who, I mean, there's an ex-professional, some people might have heard of Darius Charles, who was at Wickham, and he founded a book club, and I got to know him then as the person, as the man, not the footballer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think for him, he basically was told he'd have to retire, and that led him to kind of struggle with that. He was only 30 or so.
Yeah.
You know, like with sports people, particularly, you're so young and then you retire. And for anyone, that identity, and that, as you say, losing a career is one thing, but that can also come from, as you say, a big life change, like losing a family member.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about grief, and a lot of people associate grief with death. But actually, one of the big things that I've learned since working in grief is that actually ambiguous grief exists throughout our lives, you know, throughout every stage of our life. That can be from when you're really young and you lose your favourite toy, right through to, you know, being a young child whose parents get divorced and suddenly you're not just their child anymore, you know, they're separate people, and you've lost your identity within that family because you now have to form new relationships with your parents as single people or as individual people. And losing a job, you know, we've went through the process of, you know, redundancies at CRUK, and we all had to fight for our roles. Like the concept of that and losing who you are there. Like I had a real crisis because I was going through the redundancy process 3 months after Dad died, and I'd just lost him and I'd lost my identity of being his daughter, and then I was going to lose the job that kept me close to him because we worked in a cancer charity. And it was just like, what do you mean? Like, who am I? Like, who am I going to be if I don't have this job and I don't have my dad, and my relationship at the time was falling apart, like, and COVID, like my whole normality had like been ripped from me, and like everybody else, you know, who am I now? And I think the hangover from COVID is that there's so many people just going like, I can't just pretend that was a weird 2 years and just get on with my life. Like, I'm a different person now.
It's changed. It would be almost expected that would change people. You know what I mean? Like, to be able to, I don't think you can just, as you say, shut it off and be like, oh, that didn't happen, let's just carry on, because everyone would have gone through. I think everyone would have gone through significant change.
Whether that's
traumatic.
You know, losing friendships. You know, a lot of people who have that distance between each other.
Yeah, even if with colleagues, if you're not in the office.
Exactly.
I mean, I found that certainly with the team.
We were such a close
team, and it changed. It was never the same again once we were working from home. No.
And that's a huge loss. You know, and each one of those things, you have an identity within them.
Yeah.
So you grieve that identity. You grieve the person that you were, the carefree version of yourself that existed before the pandemic, or, you know, the person that, you know, could go into the office and strike up a conversation with anyone, because suddenly like, oh, I'm in a new team, or I'm only working remotely and I
Yeah.
don't have that social contact, I don't have that interaction, I don't know how to be this person in this conversation. Like,
No, particularly I think with our team that we were in at the time, and the way the role changed so much as well. The job just completely changed, and again we were speaking to supporters, and it was great when everyone was doing their fundraising stops,
yeah,
and then the nature of the role changed a bit, and I think touched on this with in my conversation with Alex, so you can check that one out as well if you haven't seen that, but about how I almost then felt guilt calling up people during that time.
yeah, absolutely.
I'm saying, like, if people might have lost someone, they're stressed, they might have been on furlough,
Yeah.
and then to have to call someone up and be like, you recently cancelled a direct debit, can you, like, that just wasn't,
it just
nah,
didn't
that for
sit
me,
well.
it didn't sit well at all.
No.
And I think a lot of people probably felt that, and that's why the dynamic in
Yeah.
the team, and it was no
Totally.
one's fault necessarily, because
It's just the nature of the
the
business.
nature of the business
like,
and the role changed, but it just,
isn't
it really felt like a big moment. And then
Yeah.
that team, obviously, kind of a lot of people started to leave. I moved on to a new team, and
Yeah.
it was a shame that it came to an end that way, because it was such a good group. But
Yeah.
like you say, that in life, you never know when things are gonna
No,
end. You never know when things are gonna
absolutely.
stop.
And
So
I-
try and enjoy.
I think this is one of the big things that I've realised, especially in the last couple of years. My dad had this thing where, when he was diagnosed, he'd spent his whole life working in hospitality, right? He'd
Yeah.
been like rushing around, doing, delivering food
Yeah,
constantly, like
fast paced, a very fast paced
life, working hard, playing hard, loved to play hard just as much working hard. And he got diagnosed and he just went, whoa, like, why am I going this fast? Why is everyone going this fast? And he had this whole thing throughout the time that he was sick, when we were like stressed out, oh my God, I'm going to be late to this thing, or, oh, I'm really stressed out about this deadline. He would just be like, just chill out, what is going to be the worst case scenario, like what's going to happen if you don't get that email off on a Friday afternoon? Like, what is going to happen? You are riddling yourself with this anxiety over what? And obviously his mortality, like, really put in the forefront,
Puts
the
everything in
reality,
perspective
puts it in
of-
perspective.
yeah.
Like, well, nothing actually matters that much. And it's funny, I think grief has done a similar thing. Like, I now feel like I never rush to get anywhere. I mean, I was 20 minutes late today and I do apologise for that. But, I was sat in traffic and I was thinking, oh no, I don't, I hate being late. I hate, like,
I'm the same. It's a big
being on time
anxiety
for
driver
things.
for me.
Yeah. But I also have this concept now where I'm like, I would rather be safe and arrive without, like, bursting into this kind of like furious anxiety,
like, be flustered when you turn up.
Rather, like, and just be like, actually, me and Hans were going to meet at 11 and we were going to go for a walk, and now we're not going for a walk, so actually I know there's a bit more time, and I like rationalise it in my head, so that actually I know you're not going to be mad at me.
No.
I know I don't have to rush. And I think one of the things which, I don't know if it's a new generation thing with or maybe it's just me coming into this new like era of my life where I'm going, everything has been so fast, and actually, like, it's okay to just slow down.
I think that's in our generation thing as well. And
like,
whether we're just,
change.
you say we're late 20s now, maybe we're just getting older,
I
and it
know.
happens in every generation.
Yeah.
Maybe, but when I think our generation, particularly with like the technology and how fast it is now, and everyone's connected, and even from uni or work, it's like you can work remotely, you can always be available.
Yeah, and it's that 24/7
24/7,
availability. And actually, when I was talking to a friend yesterday, because one of the things that I did when me and my partner met was I felt so... I'd gone through a big separation from my ex, and I'd moved into my house on my own. I'd become like done this big kind of independent woman movement where I was like, right, I'm going to get on my feet, and I don't want to be, really heavily reliant on anyone else. I just want to be like independent. So when I do start dating again, I don't want it to go like, I don't want to become like completely reliant on this person straight away.
I think it's, even you mentioned straight away almost, I think any relationship, it's, I know, I mean, I've been with Freya now for a long time. We were just saying before this, finally getting married, we're coming up to like 12 years now.
Yeah.
But, so I never, we were together before Tinder. That makes me feel old, but I never did all that dating app thing. But I think I hear people talking about relationships, and I think it's so true that that person shouldn't necessarily complete you. Like, you should be complete as an
Yeah,
individual, and then you just
absolutely.
complement each other.
And
So I think being dependent on anyone is
yeah, and to be quite
is
honest,
not.
when I met Matt, I had done so much work on myself. I'd done a lot of therapy. I'd done a lot of like finding my feet as this new version of myself. I'd just got a new job, got my new house, you know, really kind of set up my life so that I could do some growing.
Yeah.
And I've met my person who I can grow with, and that's
amazing.
so lovely. You know, like I don't think that we are ever like fully complete versions of ourselves anyway, because we change so much as our lives go.
Yeah.
But I know that I've met my person that can help me create that space when I can't find it myself. You know, like he's my biggest cheerleader, and I can literally achieve anything with him, which is amazing. But one of the things that we were talking about was, you know, that immediate demand, you know, that need to be available all of the time. And I think that's the part of the remote working, but also things like WhatsApp, where you can see people are online, you can see when they've read your message, you can see when they're typing, like most messenger things.
Yeah.
But being able to see that makes it quite difficult to not think they're on their phone, they're not replying to me, or like somebody sends you a video on Instagram but they haven't yet replied to your text.
Oh yeah.
Because they're sat there going, I haven't got the capacity to speak right now, but I'm like mindlessly scrolling, and I know that Hans would love this dog video, so I'm going to send it to him.
But then it makes you think, oh,
then you're like,
got
but
time
they're
to
not talking to me. You know, they're not
Yeah.
replying to this message. And this weird kind of concept that we have as a generation, or you know, as a society now, that we have to be like readily available to be at the end of the phone all the time.
Yeah.
So one of the things I first did, and actually I've been really happy since I've done it, is I just turned off all of my you know, on WhatsApp you can change the settings so that you can't read
receipts.
you can't see when I'm online, you can't see when I've read it. And it was partly to set that boundary with my partner, to say, with Matt, and say, like, you know, I want us to live in a very, like, independent, I want us to be independent.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't want us to, like, feel...
Because it's like, as much as as you say, you're coming together and your life's going to be together, we've got... We're busy people, everyone's busy, there's other stuff going on. It's impossible to give every waking second to someone.
And I realised actually through doing that I also have lots of other friends that I'm constantly messaging and like constantly there for. And sometimes you just have to go like, yeah, I can be on my phone and I can be scrolling, like I can be doom scrolling, right? And I'm just doing that for me.
For you,
and I'm doing that for me, and it's my device, and I can use this device, and I don't have to be engaging with this person or engaging with this group of people, because you know everybody gets thrown into group chats, and it's just like
I mute every group chat, and it's probably quite common, but every group chat I'm in I mute, because I'm like, if someone needs me
they'll call me,
they'll either message me directly or they'll call me, and I can't, like, when it's all buzzing and pinging off.
But it really helped my anxiety, because I also he then turned off all of his so that I couldn't be anxious about where he was, what he was doing, like, because I had that fear going into a new relationship after having trust broken from a previous relationship. Those anxieties follow you. And if we were to form a really healthy foundation for us to set those boundaries and have that kind of new base where we trust each other and we're happy together, then we need it to, you know, set those boundaries early on, and it actually really helped both of us with anxiety.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I think it's good. Like, I don't know, we don't have to be available all the time.
No, exactly.
Like,
and I think that's the thing, and I know I'm similar in that can stress. I'm quite active on social media. Obviously, Cappuccino being it started as an Instagram page. Sometimes I'll be going to post something and I'm like, oh, but I haven't got back to those messages. Are they going to think, oh, he's got time to do that? And so even like someone who's like messaged me, and quite often people who, if I message them, they're not immediately straight back to me either. And I'm letting that impact some content that I want to put out for it. So I think
you're using it as a business, you know, page as much as...
It's trying to raise awareness. So I'm like, sometimes I stop, and when I actually rationalise it, it does make myself laugh, because I'm like, I've got this page talking about mental health awareness, and self-care is not selfish. Yet I'm maybe not putting out content I want to put out because I'm worried it might upset someone who I haven't met, and I'm like, you know, I
It's
need to
just
practice what I
so-
preach a bit more. But I've got better at that and not always having to be available.
But I think it's just so interesting because like I think this ties into the whole conversation around mental health. Like that concern did not exist 10 years ago. Like
No.
it just didn't.
No,
like
the way that modern society
the
is,
way
like,
that
we're not evolved, or humans, and we're not designed to
Absolutely.
have stimulation all the time.
Yeah,
And I think that's,
and you know, whether that's being socially connected all the time or being like professionally connected all of the time through platforms like LinkedIn or just through Teams, you know, like I'm terrible for taking my work phone everywhere with me just in case I get a Teams message and I have to be readily available. And like I could be on my lunch break taking a nice walk with the dog and my phone will ring for work. And I'll pick it up and I'll go, oh yeah, no, I'm just on a dog walk, I can talk, no worries. That's my work. You know, that I really, like, that's where, like, professionally I need to set more boundaries, you know, and I know that, like, one of my biggest lessons and one of the things that I think I'll forever be, growing in is setting those boundaries. And, like, we're empaths, right? We like being there for people.
Yeah, we're very
like,
like-minded. And that was something I was going to bring up. I think you kind of mentioned it. So I very often, and have done throughout growing up, through school, for everything, I like to be there for people. I'll always be the care giver, let's say, and then but I need to learn to kind of take that myself as well, but also that it's not necessarily possible for me to always be there for other people, and sometimes you've got to
a level of protection.
It takes a level of protection, but yeah, I'm the same. I would hate to think that someone needed me and I wasn't available, and this, but it's again, I think it comes from that perspective. And I think before we hit record, so you were talking about like you manage people now, and so I've been talking about being an empath and that obviously we're both kind of people are very important, and they're probably like the most important asset any company has. Not to get into too business jargon, but it's true, because I think the most important asset is your people, because no matter how good your idea is, if you don't have people that want to work for you and are inspired and motivated, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
So how have you found kind of managing people? Because is that kind of in person, or are you doing that remotely as well?
It's all remote. So my team are based across the UK.
Okay, so it's all remote.
I've got an officer in Belfast, one up near Glasgow, one in Cardiff, and two in London.
Mrs. Worldwide.
So Mrs. Worldwide.
Well, UK-wide.
Mrs. UK World. Yeah, UK-wide. No, so the team are remote. And I've never managed a team before. So I was like, ooh, 5 people is a lot of people to suddenly go from no one to 5.
It's quite
It was quite the jump, but I was ready for this kind of career step, and I really wanted to try and push myself professionally. And I have to say, it's probably been the best thing I've ever done. I came in and I said to one of my old managers actually at Cancer Research, you know, have you got any tips for managing a team? And my last manager at Cancer Research was brilliant. She's just amazing. She's a really compassionate person, and very supportive and empowering. And like, she really like pushed me to develop professionally. And I wouldn't be in this job without her encouragement. So, you know, I really appreciate everything that she did. And I was like, right, I've learned from having great managers and I've learned from having not so great managers. What do I do? And she said, you have to decide whether you're going to be people's friends, and you're going to go in with that approach, or whether you are going to be the manager, and you're going to be sitting there on your professional throne dictating things, because it's too hard to do both, essentially. And so I'm too much of an empath, I think. And I'm also far too transparent about like why I work in this industry to not let them into it. I mean, it would take them about 5 seconds to look into me online to find out any of the podcasts that we've done or anything like that. So so I decided to go in with a really kind of open approach, and I said to them, look, you know, I'm young, you know, they're all much older than me. Not much older, actually, but some of them
they'll
are.
thank you for that when if they watch this. You're all really
some
old.
Of them are. In fact, so one of them is 66, right? And when I met him, I could just see the look on his face where he was thinking,
like a young
who is this? You know, like, I have children older than this child, like, who's now going to be my manager. And actually, we have built a really, really strong friendship, professional working relationship, and it's amazing. But I went in essentially and said, like, this is who I am, and this is why I'm here, and this is how passionate I am. And I put together this document called a Get to Know Me document, and it was literally just like, these are the things I like to do, these are the hours I like to work, this is why I'm passionate about this. These are some of the dates that are really important to me. So like every year I take Dad's anniversary and Dad's birthday off. And around those dates I can be a little bit useless, you know, like I feel rubbish around them. So, and I'm, you know, just because I'm managing a team doesn't mean I don't need that support
And
too.
I think that's and I think that's such a great way to be or open. And I think we spoke about on my manager is because she's almost vulnerable with me. I see. Oh, okay, I want to work for her because I just see you're a human who's going through things as well.
And I can, like, the permission to be vulnerable when somebody in authority shows you that vulnerability.
It's that leading from example by action, isn't it? They say action's louder than words. So it's easy for a manager maybe to come in and say, you can all talk to me if you're going through anything, fine, but if
you don't
they
know
never see
them,
the manager
right?
going through anything,
you don't know anything about them. You don't know if they're married.
Exactly.
You don't know if
and
they have a dog.
Do you want to open up to this?
You have no idea who this person is, but suddenly you're trying to build a relationship with them in a personal way. And actually, you know, I'm really glad that I did take that approach because this year's been hard for my staff. You know, the work that we do, we work with communities who've been bereaved. It is heavy stuff. We're working in 5 really deprived areas, so lots of suicide, lots of death through drugs and alcohol, so much associated with mental health. And it is really heavy and it's really, really hard to navigate. And they need to be able to have someone who can hold the space for them and they feel safe enough to do that. So it's been such a pleasure working with them. And I know a bit about all of them. You know, I know each of their kids' names and, you know, all of their birthdays and when they're going on holiday, and I know their favourite places to go and their favourite chocolates and things like that.
Like
and
you know
just
them as people.
Build it, like they're more than just my staff.
Yeah,
and I mean, like the way that we work together means that we're a team. Like when I'm off, they're still, you know, they are still working so hard. I mean, they've hit like way exceeded any expectations of this project. It's been an amazing achievement so far. And the funders and the charity are both like, wow, this is really unique, you know, for a team who are such a variation of ages across the nation, like who we've actually never met all together as a team. We're all coming together for the first time in July to have a team away day. It's quite hard to find somewhere to go away when you've got
surely every day's an away day, isn't it? It's a home day, really.
Everyone's everywhere. So we're actually all coming together in Manchester, which is not one of our sites, but our funder is based there. So we're going to Manchester for 2 days.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
And it would be so amazing just to be together because we've all been in the position this year where we've had two of the team members have experienced their own personal bereavement. So as a team, we've supported them through that. And there's been a lot of, you know, life changes for each of them, whether it's moving house, you know, whether it's just the stress of the cost of living, you know. The cost of living has had a massive impact on people over the last year. I think, you know, we work for charities, so not like rolling in money. So, you know, we're feeling it just as much. So it's been a really, I don't know, I feel incredibly lucky to have had the opportunity to manage this team in particular, because of how well it's come together, and it's taught me so much about how I want to manage going forward, because like it's really important that work gets done, of course, you know, we have a role, we have a job
there's
to
a
do,
reason that of course,
but life exists. You know, if your child is homesick and or you and your partner have had a fallout and you're really struggling with your mental health, or if you're just feeling really run down, like you're carrying a lot of weight on your shoulders whilst you're dealing with all this stuff in the community, and you're seeing
the nature of the work as well.
Really hard stories, you know, hard hitting, really, really sad things happening. If you need a break, you know, if you need some time off, that's okay. Like I'd rather have the full version of you and you to bring your full authentic self into work and feel like you can, than have a section of you because
Yeah.
you feel like you have to hide so much. And it was one of the reasons why I got into talking so much about taking grief into work, because mental health is being accepted more at work now, which is positive. But in lots of places, it still is like a bit of a tokenist. It would just have Mental Health Awareness Week. Suddenly, all the organisations have got something in place.
Yeah, I know.
And then for the rest of the year, they don't talk about it again. And actually, you know, what it looks like to have long-term mental health is very different to having, oh, I took a mental health day.
Yeah.
And it's fine to take a mental health day, but is it fine to take 3 weeks of mental health days throughout the year? And there's still a lot of work to be done there around kind of how
definitely.
managers manage that situation, how organisations
Yeah.
manage people. But the reality is, like, the world is very complicated, and life happens
is.
outside of
Yeah.
work.
That's
And
the
if
thing,
you
isn't it?
can't, as a manager, make space for that, you shouldn't really be managing. Like, you have to recognise your people, your staff are humans before they are your employees. Like,
Exactly. There's the job that they're doing for you is just a part of their life.
yeah, it pays the bills.
And
like,
also,
I love my job, but it pays my bills.
Yeah,
and if it's
exactly.
going to have a detriment on my mental health, then I'm probably not going to be able to continue it forever. Like,
no, exactly. And I think that's so great to hear from yourself and about managing. And it's something interesting where you said about being able to come in your full authentic self and not having to hide things. I mean, I've, over the course of my working life, had kind of, it's been quite cyclic, in terms of, I got two conflicting sides of me, really. So when I said about that academic identity and the achiever, like when I was younger, and again, you spoke about grief, maybe with parents splitting, and I've maybe never considered it maybe grief, but it is something that, and in therapy I've had that kind of nuclear family, that's something that I don't really remember, never really had. Like I was 10 when my parents split, and so for the whole
really
of like
formative
growing
years
up,
of your life,
formative.
right? Yeah.
So for me at that time, I needed control or certainty when there was uncertainty, and for me that was academics. So that was
the easiest way to
the
control
easiest
things when
way
you're
to
10
control
is to
things.
be good at school, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Because then I was like, well, I know that if I work hard, that I'll be able to achieve in this.
Yeah.
And took that with me, and that was fine. Then at uni, even I went to university, and even in freshers year, I was like, I want to get a PhD. I was so set on that. Still enjoyed university, made some great friends, and played sports. Like, it wasn't like I
But the
didn't
pressure was
socialise.
there, like,
But for me, I was at university to get to the PhD.
Yeah.
I then got a place on a PhD course, and then within 6 months, that was when I had really bad burnout, because suddenly just working hard, you're not necessarily going to stand out when you're doing a PhD. And the nature of research, I mean, if it all worked, then we wouldn't need PhD. Yeah, it's competitive.
It's
and also
really
there wasn't,
competitive market.
It's a competitive market, and I, again, where maybe I hadn't had that nuclear family, or I hadn't had spaces to talk about how I feel, or talk about how I carried a lot. And probably for the first 22, so I was 22 and I kind of had my burnout, and that was when I
You're so young
triggered
as well
with my
to be like doing your PhD
depression and
as
anxiety.
well.
Yeah, so I was like 22, and for those 6 months I didn't take any days off.
Yeah.
And I was working probably 7 till 7 most days, working weekends.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, the only way I'm gonna feel better or be happy is if I achieve more. Because that was my identity. We spoke about identity crisis. Like, that was who I was.
And it's really interesting because I didn't realise until I met Matt that there's a lot of, not just this, there's a lot of competition within academia in terms of, getting funding and things, or getting places, but there's also a huge amount of kind of judgment in terms of what kind of PhD you're doing, or like who's funding what.
Within the
competition
within the
between
community,
academics.
it's not a very, or from my experience, it wasn't a very friendly kind of community. And
so
even
you've
in
also
the same,
got to battle that, like, at the same time
yeah.
as like not feeling yourself in this space, and like not maybe recognising your work in the same as
maybe
other
pressure
people's
because
stuff.
my academic had, there was funding and my place was being funded, so I'm like, oh, he's put out money for this place.
For sure.
But also, even within the group, I think everyone wants to be the one who's first author. Everyone wants to be. So, but at the time, I probably went into it loving that because I liked the idea of being an achiever. So I was probably in that. But yeah, having that kind of breakdown was probably one of the best things that could have happened, because if I hadn't, I'd still be probably doing academic stuff now and not actually enjoying passions that that I like, and
Yeah.
like the whole cappuccino and wanting to create awareness, and like that all came from really having to
Yeah.
talk about mental health. But
I think it's really interesting because a lot of the people who obviously we work with lots of different people who have a host of different experiences, but a lot of people have experienced the separation of parents when they're young, especially, and they've like lost that normality. You know, that like world has been flipped upside down. I now have two houses. I now have
Oh,
two
yeah.
sets of parents. I now have these two new people I have to. And I mean, sometimes relationship splits are very amicable, and but quite a lot of the time as well, people have to try and navigate these weird relationships between their parents that they've never
yeah,
seen before
almost.
as well. So that's an awful lot of pressure on children. But that impact, the like failure to have the perfect family, we see so much with in grief and bereavement, where people really like that processing that separation doesn't happen
Yeah,
necessarily until something big happens.
something
And for
big
you, that
happens.
was that being at 22 and having that moment. But
Yeah,
a lot of people who we speak to haven't processed the separation of their parents or that loss of what their life was like
yeah.
until something like a death happens.
It's until something happens that normally the whole family would come together,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah, and it's
family. Yeah,
these weird moments where you're like, oh my goodness, like,
yeah,
who am I in this room of people? Like, am I meant to be with them? Am I meant to be with
yeah.
them? Like, and actually, when my dad died, I really struggled with that. My dad was like my person. Like, we're very, very similar, and I have since really developed new relationships with my mum and my sister and my brother, and I feel different now. But when I first lost dad, I had been so close to him for like 4 years. We'd been to every appointment together.
Yeah.
Every day I went to the house and I would walk in every morning, like clockwork. I would walk into the house. I'd go into his room where he'd be sat in bed, and I'd make him a cup of tea and I'd kiss him on the head, and we'd sit in bed and he would play like, oh, have you heard this song? Or have you heard this? Or he'd be watching Antiques Roadshow and he'd be telling me how much
Yeah.
everything's going to go for because he's seen them all before, and he thought that he was really clever by telling me to
Yeah.
the penny because
Yeah.
he was like, she won't know. But I'd lost him, I'd lost this whole like this person. And when we were very similar in our kind of fiery nature, like if somebody said something, we were in a room of family members and somebody said something, we'd both be the ones to look at each other and roll our eyes.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
like
or like we wouldn't necessarily let things slide. Or
exactly, he would back me up.
Yeah, he'd back you
He
up,
would back me
yeah.
up. I'd back him up. And when he died, I was like, where do I fit in this family? Like,
Yeah, like the
who am
dynamics
I
are
now?
really-
Like,
yeah.
I have lost like who I am within like my role within this family has now gone.
Yeah.
And I've had to kind of rebuild that over the last couple of years. It's been it's been a crazy experience,
Yeah,
really. But also
definitely.
like get to know my mum in a new way because she doesn't have dad anymore.
And I guess it's
like-
as you say, what sorry to like interject there, but
No, it's
what you say about with if you're going through that, it's that kind of, I guess, probably every single member of the family will have a different
yeah, everybody has
experience
a
of
completely
grief,
different
even in the
experience
same
to it.
thing, but that dynamic and
And there's actually a lot of difficulty that comes with accepting the way that other people grieve. Like
almost there's not a one size
there's
fits all.
not so like
yeah.
the fact that I'm really open about dad and the fact that I will talk about him all the time. My siblings will talk about him, but in the comfort of our home.
Yeah, family space,
For them, like their grieving is far less public than mine. I think mine, partly through the nature of my work, the whole point is that I want more grief visibility. Like I don't want people to feel like, oh my god, what is this feeling? Am I a weirdo for feeling like this?
Yeah.
Because there's also a lot of like really complicated feelings that come when someone dies. I mean, Dad was sick for 4 years. I had a huge sense of relief when he died because
Almost in the
I couldn't imagine watching him go through another minute of what he was going through. Like the last week of his life was honestly horrendous. And every day we were like, I really hope he goes tonight,
Which
and
almost
it's so
hearing
bizarre,
yourself say that,
saying
yeah.
that, right? And then you have this huge level of guilt because you feel relieved, but you're also like, 4 years of my life, I've woken up every day thinking, I wonder how Dad is today. I wonder what's going to happen. is he going to live? And also being terrified of how he's going to die. You know, we knew he would die, but we didn't know what it would be like. We didn't know where he'd be or like what the situation would be. And this kind of fear of that, I didn't have to worry about that anymore.
No, I think that's an interesting perspective, because I know sometimes people say like, oh, and again, this would probably be very much the wrong thing to say to someone. So, but I'm just saying in terms of people might say, oh, at least you had time knowing that he was like, oh, at least you were able to do things for us. Whereas it rather if it was sudden, but actually, 4 years with those stresses, anxiety, like. I mean, there's no obviously it's always going to be going to be a difficult situation. There's never the perfect way for someone to die.
And I think this is the thing, is that like there is no grief hierarchy. It's not like it's not better because they went really quickly. It's not worse because, you know, if you are 85 and you've just lost your husband who's 96, it's still going to be. It's still the most, like if you're 18 and you lose your granddad who's at 98, like it's still the saddest thing because it's a horrible situation. Like grief is relative to the person. Like it shouldn't be invalidated for anything.
No, of course.
But and it's funny though, because at the beginning I was like, I did exactly that though. I was like, oh well, you know, we were really lucky because we had 4 years with him. We made a lot of memories.
Almost
in those 4
trying
years.
to tell
I was
yourself.
So lucky. We were so lucky. And then I was like, oh my god, I'm 24 and my dad died. Actually, I'm not very lucky. You know.
Oh, lucky
and
me.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of actually eventually come to terms with it, and you go, oh, like no, it was crap. Like this is just crap. Like it's okay to be upset about this because it's rubbish. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's such a, in general, like grief or anything, or what we're talking about, mental health, or even if you don't have a mental health, like mental illness or anything, just it's okay to feel rubbish.
Yeah,
I think especially we talk about this generation and the stress of being
world,
available, and
like
you feel like you're always on the show.
Yeah.
And I know here I am doing a podcast, so I'm part of the problem.
We are on show.
But in terms of, you know, when photos or, you know, people comparing, like, it's okay to, and that's why I think it's important to have spaces and conversations like this, because
it's got to be visible, like
it's got to be visible and real, and that's the kind of thing. But
and until you have the impact, until you have that experience, that first panic attack, or you know, the day that you can't get out of bed and you just have to be under a duvet, or you just like, you love the person that you're with but you just cannot fathom speaking to them, or speaking to anyone, right? Like it's there's literally,
until you've been there, you cannot explain that.
And the whole, I mean, it's amazing that you're doing this, and I take my hat off to you for all of the work that you've done, because creating this space is so important. And you know, I'm so grateful for you like holding this conversation, because it's I mean, there's so much that intertwines between mental health and grief and just like the weight of the world, and it's so important that we just keep talking about it, because unfortunately it's not going to get easier. Like, you know, the world is going to get more complicated, and there will be more pandemics, or there will be climate change, or there will be wars, or there will be things
AI,
that
something will happen with AI.
There'll be things throughout our lives that will impact us massively, and the impact will change, you know, as we get older, suddenly you'll have a child to look after at some point, and you'll be like, oh my goodness, I've got to think about them and their mental health, and what does this look like? And
I think that's an interesting one as well, or them growing up, how, I don't know, get them on technology. You see kids with phones looking at things so young now. Well, I had a bit of time working in a nursery, and like when we were younger, maybe the wooden blocks, people would do that for like a phone or whatever, but they had the wooden blocks and they were like tapping like that, and I was like, oh, okay,
completely different.
It's changing.
I used to nanny actually one of the kids. I was like, can you do the phone? And she was like, and I was like, no, this is like this is the phone. This is what the phone is. You know, this is not a phone. It's like, actually that is now, right? Like,
it's changing, and I think the world will look very different in 10 years time, and whatever. But hopefully, the conversation, and people will be okay to talk about how they're doing.
We'll keep leading the conversations, and it'll be okay.
So I think we're probably drawing to a close. Thanks so much for that. There's one question that has kind of come into my mind that I want to ask you, because it's something that actually in my introduction I said that kind of, I'm pleased you mentioned it, because I kind of want the space in this podcast to be about who people are, not what they do. And I know we spoke about identity, and it was like, oh, who am I now? So And then, I mean, it's a very difficult question. So to answer, it seems simple, but yeah. So would you say, who are you? How would you describe who you
How
are?
would I? How would I describe myself? I would say that I am an incredibly resilient and strong woman, and I would say I kind of lead. I think, especially over the last few years, I was really crap as a teenager. And I had a really bad few years of mental health where I just really was, I didn't know who I was. And I think finding Matt, I think I've found who I am. I think I'm the most like the me version of me that I've
Yeah.
ever been.
Which is an amazing feeling
Which
when you
is
find that.
such a
Like I've
special
only
feeling.
recently found that as well.
Yeah, and it's
with
such
me,
a
but
special feeling. And like, I genuinely feel like I was put on this planet to be a very compassionate and passionate person. And I think, yeah, my role is to empower people and inspire people and just to show people love. I don't know if that
Yeah.
sounds really cliche, but I don't know. I feel incredibly proud of the person that I am now because
Amazing.
it feels a million miles away from anyone that I thought I'd get to be.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. I mean, I've had a rubbish time, but everything that has happened in my life has made me the person I am today, and I honestly wouldn't change any of it for the world. So
Amazing. No, thanks, Lucy.
Thank
What a
you.
way to end it. No, thanks so much. And
Thank you.
yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this latest episode of Flat Whites and Insights, and I really hope you gained something from that conversation. I know I certainly did. It would mean a lot if you can like and subscribe on whatever platform you may be watching or listening on, but also if you head over to Instagram and give me a follow at Cappuccino. This is the best place to contact me, but also see the latest developments on the platform as we look to increase awareness of mental health through my passions for coffee and football. In addition, if you've heard something that you can relate to or you want to talk about a little bit more, feel free to message me on that platform. But also, if you fancy coming on yourself and having a conversation, then do let me know, because I'm always keen to connect with new people and get insights into other areas and other passions and other challenges that I might have no experience of myself. Thanks again, and I really hope you tune in for the next episode. Take care of yourselves. I've been Hans. Thank you.